to another Landlord Spotlight. My name is Samantha, and I'm on the education and community team here at TurboTenant. Today, we're joined by Teresa, who is a landlord using TurboTenant to manage her rental here in Colorado. Thanks for being here, Teresa.
Thank you so much, Samantha, for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, can you tell me a bit about how you got into landlording and your rental?
Really interestingly, I didn't initially think I was going to be getting into residential rentals. So I first really got into rental properties because I own an RV. And I used to live in a very urban environment, and I had a very difficult time finding RV storage where I lived. And then when I moved to Colorado, I yet again had difficulty finding RV storage where I lived. And it got me really interested in, well, how do RV storage facilities work? I'm really interested in this. Is this something that I would want to own or I'd want to develop? So that's how I started. And I started consuming all kinds of content about this self-storage space and specifically RV storage. A lot of that through AJ Osborne and his Self-Storage Income podcast.
Wow. So how did you prepare to become a landlord then? Are there books or podcasts or anything that you used and recommend?
Like a lot of folks do that are looking at storage, you start going down all these rabbit holes. You find a new podcast or a new book, and before you know it, you're overwhelming yourself with all kinds of self-education. So in addition to AJ Osborne stuff, I started being turned on to other places like Bigger Pockets. I listened to a lot of Bigger Pockets content, specifically their rookie real estate podcast. I liked a lot. Read a lot of their books, and I even took their very first rookie real estate boot camp, which helped me put all of this learnings onto paper and into practice, which made it a lot easier and more build confidence so I could take those next steps forward. Yeah,
absolutely. And why did you decide to use TurboTenant for managing your rental? What features were most important to you?
Yeah, so one of the great things about consuming all this content and learning all of these things is you start learning about all the tools. It's going to make it a lot easier for you, especially when you're new and you don't know what's out there and what you need. So as I started learning about what tools existed, I learned, hey, there's all-in-one landlord software. There's stuff that can really help you manage everything humanly possible that you're not physically needing to be there in person to do. And so before I decided on TurboTenant, I knew I wanted some kind of digital solution that allowed me to list my property really easily and hit as many people as possible. I wanted to be able to create lease agreements, something that felt very binding and formal. Background checks was a big thing. I learned over and over, finding the right tenant is going to be one of the biggest success indicators in being a landlord. I wanted to be professional. I didn't want tenants texting me at all hours of the night. I wanted a place where they could submit maintenance requests and other things. And then also I'm kind of a numbers nerd. I like to put together spreadsheets and forecasts and whatever. And so I wanted this platform to be able to help me track my expenses, collect my rent, and do everything I needed to from a financial perspective in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to expenses, several months ago, you had reached out to customer support and you had some questions about adding a tenant and getting the e-sign process started. I actually grabbed that ticket. And so we chatted back and forth to get that process started and get that all figured out. And then you had provided some feedback on the expense feature. So fast forward a few months, you've been using TurboTenant and then you joined the Turbo team. So now that you're on the team and you're a landlord using TurboTenant, have you learned anything about the way that TurboTenant handles landlord feedback?
Yeah, that's a really funny story. I was a TurboTenant user and now I actually work for TurboTenant. And yes, you were the one who answered that ticket. What I've really learned, and actually what came out of that interaction with you, there's two areas that have really surprised me once I came on board with TurboTenant. One specifically is the way that our product marketing team really speaks to and learns from landlords, and not just our product marketing team, but the product team. It is insane how many interviews that they do on a monthly basis, how often they're reaching out to landlords to facilitate interviews about specific things. And not just features and benefits, but trying to learn their behavior, why they chose to do something. Oh, we saw you came in and then you signed up and then you did this, but then you didn't do this. And why is that? Like, how can we make that better for you? And so the whole process of continuously interviewing landlords that are using our product to make the product better or to offer solutions that they really want, it just blows my mind. The other area that's really surprised me and I'm very proud of is our customer service team and all the different ways that they touch landlords. You were on that team previously as well, and the structure that's put around it. You see a lot of products and you say, okay, you can chat and you can email and you can, maybe do a phone call if you're paying enough or whatever. But the way that TurboTenant really takes all the different channels in which landlords can contact their customer service team, puts things in queues so people can touch the requests as quickly as possible, really closely tracks the amount of time that it takes to find solutions for everybody. We have an initiative at TurboTenant where everybody in the company is spending time with the customer service team and responding to landlord requests. And there are times where there's nothing in the queue because we responded to everything and we're on top of it. And it just really blows my mind, the care and the quickness and the level of service and thoroughness that's given to landlords who need more help with the platform.
Yeah, that's awesome. And be sure to pass that on to the CX team as well, so they can hear all these wonderful accolades and things you're saying about them. So all that in mind, now that you've been a landlord for a while, you've got your rental, what have you learned about being a landlord that you wish you knew when you started?
I think that the big thing that comes to mind is looking at your rental business like it's a hospitality business. So I think when a lot of us are looking at getting into rentals, we're thinking about investments and properties and assets and products and ultimately that's not what we're offering. We're selling a service, just like when you rent a hotel room, it's a hospitality play. A lot of landlords are approaching things where it's, how can I spend as little money as possible to make my place half enough decent to get, good enough rent and whatever that might look like, and taking a step back and feeling like, man, I could have done a better job for my first tenant before they moved in. And so really looking at the service that I'm offering and not a good enough asset so I can bring in some extra money every month.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great things to think about as you're considering being a landlord. And that in mind, do you have advice for anybody who might be interested in becoming a landlord and trying it out?
The three things I think that have really resonated with me were one, self-education. I think I spent a year and a half or more just consuming podcasts and books and listening to people and learning. And that's where a lot of people start. As I talk to other landlords, they do the same thing. And you really almost can't get enough. There's so much out there. And the more you hear it, the more it's just going to be ingrained in your mind and you're going to feel comfortable with it and taking those steps. So don't stop that education. The next thing would be going to meetups. I consumed content for all this period of time and still hadn't done a deal. And I finally took a step out the door and went to a meetup, and that meetup led to my first deal, an off-market deal. And so that one meetup. So it's amazing the connections that you can make and the relationships that you can build just by getting in person with people where possible. And then the other thing is just taking that first step. So a lot of folks, myself included, kind of get paralysis by analysis, and maybe you decide the niche you want to pursue, maybe you don't, and maybe you're overwhelmed. There's so many options. And I always heard with a lot of these leaders in the space that just take a step, just do something. And just by buying that first property, even if it's not the type of asset you're going to invest in forever, it's really going to build your confidence. It's really going to make you feel like you can work out the kinks in your process. And that is so true. Just by buying my first thing, wasn't anything crazy fancy, wasn't anything, wasn't my dream property. It was a good enough property to get me in the door. And so I would definitely recommend that folks do those three things.
Awesome. Let's circle back on that. Tell me about your rental.
My rental, yeah. So I live in Colorado. I live in Boulder County. It's very expensive here. And I found a townhouse outside of Greeley, which is kind of a college town and a blue collar town. And it's a nice little 3-bedroom townhouse that a realtor I'd met through the meetup had found. He had some rentals in the area, was telling me about the rents that you could get there. And a lot of places were really undervalued from a rent standpoint. And so was able to acquire this property. The existing tenant was going to move out. And so was able to do some pretty minor fix up, just a very small investment in getting some stuff spruced up and getting a new tenant in there. So it's been great so far. I've loved using TurboTenant during that process. I do all my rent collection through there. I get check-ins. My tenants enjoy that they can do maintenance requests through there and kind of get status updates on that. My tenants like that they can split their rent through that as well. And so it's really helped me feel more confident. Another thing that I've liked about this rental in particular is that it's not out my back door, but it's not close enough that I really want to drive to it. So I've got to use this almost as a practice for having a long distance rental without really having a true long distance rental. And so it's let me kind of dip my toe in the water there and held my interest in feeling confident that I could do something long distance and not falter too heavily.
So surprise question that wasn't on our list ahead of time, but what is your investment goal? Well, what's next for you?
So one of the whys behind my investing is my husband and I have a considerable age gap. And so as we look at retirement planning and what financial freedom means to us, it really throws a lot more wrenches in. And so I'm looking at how do I scale more? How do I get more bang for my buck? And it's not going to be by acquiring cheap townhomes. So a couple of our next steps, one is we're actually looking at moving my mother-in-law into a multifamily unit out of state. And so that will be a way for us to invest out of state, also provide a great place for my mother-in-law to live and continue that journey and dip our toe into probably more small multifamily. Secondarily, I'm interested in larger multifamily. So right now I am about wrapping up a boot camp for multifamily investing. And on top of that, really reading a lot more about creative financing and learning a lot more as far as syndication goes. So a lot different spin to what I've been doing with residential and TurboTenant. So continue doing some of the smaller multifamily and residential properties while also jumping into commercial a little bit as well. And I haven't really lost my zest for wanting to do RV storage. So who knows, down the road, maybe that'll happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with me about building your real estate empire and sort of the journey that got you here. And I appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you so much, Samantha. I appreciated being on.